Hello, this is Math Just in Time, and today we're going to talk about variables, expressions, terms, coefficients, and like terms. And these are very important to understand fully so that we can use these words whenever we are doing problems through algebra. So let's take them one at a time. Variables. Variables are letters that are used to represent a number. Most of the time, you'll see an X or a Y, but it can be any letter of the alphabet. But you'll see 2X or 3Y or something like that, or it can be 4T. But usually you'll see an X and a Y, but it can be any number, any letter. An expression is a group of numbers and variables. So you'll see this more whenever we do examples, but an example would be 2x plus 1. That's an expression. Now, if we have an equation, it would be equal to something. But an expression is just part of that. A term. A term is a part of the expression that is added, subtracted, or multiplied. So 2x is a term within this expression, and 1 is also a term. Don't worry, we'll go over several examples so that we can understand this. Coefficients, that's the number part of a term. So if you have a variable, the coefficient is 2. And like terms. Like terms are terms that have the same variable and the same exponent. So if we had 2x squared and x squared, these are like terms. But if we had 2x and just x, these are not like terms. And we'll go over these in detail some more in some examples. So let's do a couple of examples. Let's say we have 2x plus 3. Well, are there any variables in here? Are there any letters? Yeah, we have an x. So x is our variable, and we only have one this time. What about an expression? Expression is a group of numbers and variables. So this whole thing is an expression. If it was something like this, like we talked about earlier, this would be an equation, because an equation has an equal sign, and this would be an expression. What about terms? Terms are the different parts of an expression. So the terms we have here are 2x, and then we also have a 3. So those are our terms. And coefficients. Coefficients are the numbers that are in front of a variable. So we decided that x was our variable, and the number that's in front of that is 2. So our coefficient is 2 on this one. So let's look at this example. We have 5 plus x minus 7y. So do we have any variables? Do we have any letters in this? And it looks like we have an x and we have a y. So those are our variables. Now, what about an expression? Well, an expression is several terms together or terms together, and this isn't equal to anything, so it's not an equation. So the whole thing is an expression. Now, what about terms? Terms are the little bitty pieces that are all put together to make an expression. So we have a 5, we have an x, and we have a negative 7y. Now, I didn't write plus 5 and I didn't write plus x because we just kind of assume that it's a positive number. But yeah, I made sure that I wrote down the negative so that we know that the negative 7y is negative. Now, coefficients. Coefficients are the numbers that are in front of the variable. So let's look at the first one. We've got an x. So if we look up here, there's not a number in front of this variable. Well, something that we do in algebra, instead of writing 1x, we don't write this. We actually just write x. we assume that if there's a variable there and there's no number in front of it, that the number is 1. So if we had y, it would be the same thing as 1y, but we don't write it like this. So if we see, what if we saw just z? Maybe the variable is z. Then the number in front of it, if it's just by itself, we would assume to be 1. So, what are the coefficients here? Well, what's the coefficient in front of the x? It's 1. Very good. And this one's different. What's the coefficient in front of the y? And you may be tempted to just say 7, but look, there's a negative sign here. So the answer is -7. You want to make sure that if there's a negative sign that you include it. That's very important. Let's look at this example. We have p squared plus 12 plus 1/2 t. So what are the variables in this? Well, we have a p and we have a t. What about the expression? What part of this is the expression? Well, it's not set equal to anything, so it's not an equation. So this whole thing is an expression. What about terms? Terms are the little bitty parts of an expression. So we have p cubed, we have 12, and we have 1/2 t. Now, what about the coefficients? We have 2 variables, so we know we're going to have 2 coefficients. So what is the number? What's the coefficient? What's the number that goes in front of p? We talked about this last example. If we just have a variable and there's not a number in front of it, we assume it to be 1. So that's going to be 1. Now let me ask you this. Let's say we had another example and we had like 1 minus p cubed. What if they were asking here? If they were saying, well, what's the coefficient that goes in front of the p term? Well, you may be tempted to say 1, and you're almost right. You've got 1, but you've got to remember this negative sign. So if you were asking what the coefficient for this would be, it would be a -1. But here, it's positive. So what other coefficient do we have? We have t. So what's the number that's in front of t? It's a little bit different this time as well. It's a 1/2, and that's okay. Coefficients can be fractions, they can be all sorts of things. And in this instance, it is a fraction.